Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling, I think it's fair to say, one of the most serious global conflicts of our time. We're talking about the full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine that began in February 2022.
It's a massive, incredibly complex subject, so our goal here is really precision. We've gone through sources designed to give simple, clear answers about the structural and political causes that led up to the invasion.
Right. And our mission today isn't to get lost in the day-to-day headlines. It's to pull back and answer those really foundational questions. Why is Russia fighting Ukraine? And maybe more importantly, what caused this war?
And the key insight, the thing you have to hold on to right from the start, is that this war is a culmination. It didn't just happen. The underlying problems, they started decades ago. You really have to start with the history to understand the present.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's start with that history. Because for centuries, this region looked very different. Russia and Ukraine weren't really separate independent nations. They were intertwined.
Deeply intertwined. First as parts of the Russian Empire, and then later, of course, as key republics within the Soviet Union.
And our sources really stress this point, that shared history is seen in completely different ways depending on whether you're in Kyiv or Moscow.
Absolutely. From the Russian perspective, that long history often translates to a sense of, shared heritage, of a historical unity.
But for Ukraine, that exact same history is often viewed through a very different lens. A lens of control, of subjugation, and this long, long struggle for a separate national identity.
And that dual interpretation of the past, this idea of unity versus a struggle for independence, that is the very first root of the modern conflict. You can trace it right back to that.
That whole legacy, that whole world, it basically shattered in one single moment, 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Right. When that huge political entity dissolved, the entire map of Europe changed, just overnight.
And you get this cascade of newly independent countries.
Precisely. Ukraine votes, and votes overwhelmingly for its own independence. It becomes a sovereign nation. Russia, too, becomes its own independent nation. Officially, they are two separate countries with internationally recognized borders.
But here's the crucial point for our deep dive today. Independence on paper didn't just erase everything else. It didn't erase the proximity, the deep family connections, the culture.
Or the economic and political ties built up over centuries. No, that legacy, it acted like a kind of powerful gravitational pull. And it's something Moscow clearly expected would keep Kyiv in its orbit.
Which is the perfect segue to our next section.
Right.
This idea of diverging paths. Because once Ukraine was independent, it had a choice to make.
A fundamental choice. Does it look east, back towards Moscow, or does it look west, towards, integration with Europe?
And it's fascinating how quickly they made that choice. The signals were pretty clear, pretty fast. They wanted to look west.
Very clear. They started moving toward deeper cooperation, both politically and economically, with the European Union. So we're talking about countries like Germany, France, Poland.
And that decision,
Yeah.
it immediately created tension.
Oh, immediate tension.
Yeah.
From Russia's perspective, as the sources lay it out, this was just not acceptable. Russia saw Ukraine as a core part of its sphere of influence, a crucial buffer state.
So when Ukraine started moving towards the EU, Russia saw this vital piece of its security just slipping away.
Exactly. So this disagreement wasn't just about, a trade deal here or there. It was a fundamental fight over Ukraine's entire direction. Which bloc did it belong to? It created this growing pressure, this political stress that just built and built.
It was a structural disagreement. That's the key. One was moving towards a Western model, the other was not.
And those models are often completely at odds with each other. That difference in direction, it just guaranteed friction year after year.
Okay, so if that divergence created intense political stress, the next piece of the puzzle, the security question, that's what really ratcheted things up. We have to talk about NATO.
We absolutely have to. NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it's a defensive military alliance. Its core principle, Article 5, is collective security. An attack on one is an attack on all.
So for Ukraine, a brand new country right next to a much larger, more powerful neighbor, well, seeking some kind of security guarantee seems pretty natural. And their ambition was clear. They wanted to, at some point, join NATO.
And that ambition became Russia's single greatest security fear. Russia's position was, and still is, just a definitive no to NATO expansion near its borders. The idea of a Western military alliance setting up shop in Ukraine, for them, that's an existential threat.
And it's so important to understand the two competing narratives here, because they are both completely sincere from their own perspectives. NATO says, we're a purely defensive alliance.
Right, we are here to protect our members, but Russia sees it completely differently. For them, NATO expansion is aggressive. It's geopolitical encirclement. It's a move to undermine their power.
And there's just no bridging that gap, is there? Defensive alliance versus existential threat.
It's unbridgeable. Ukraine saw NATO as the ultimate guarantee of its own sovereignty. Russia saw it as the ultimate violation of its security. So just the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO, it just magnified all the other tensions tenfold.
All that friction, political insecurity, it just simmered for decades.
Yeah.
And then it boiled over. That brings us to 2014, the flashpoints. This is when tension becomes open conflict.
2014 is the turning point, no question. And the first major event is the Russian annexation of Crimea. Crimea is not just some random piece of land. It's a hugely strategic peninsula on the Black Sea.
So why so vital? Break that down for us.
Well, geographically, it's critical. Demographically, it has a large ethnic Russian population. But most importantly for Russia, the port of Sevastopol in Crimea is the historic home base for their entire Black Sea fleet. Losing that port would cripple their naval power in the region.
So when Russia moved in and took Crimea, claiming it historically belonged to them, I mean, that just broke all the rules. It sent shockwaves around the world and completely destroyed what was left of the relationship.
And at the exact same time, fighting erupts in eastern Ukraine, specifically in the Donbas region. This is an area with strong economic ties to Russia, a lot of Russian speakers.
And you see these local groups, these so-called separatists, demanding to break away from Ukraine.
Right, and they try to form their own breakaway republics. Ukraine naturally sees this as an attack on its territory and fights back hard.
This is where the conflict gets locked in for good, isn't it?
It is, because our source material is very clear that Russia was supporting these separatist groups. With money, with training, with military equipment, the fight in Donbas became this years-long, grinding proxy war. The political divide was now a military one, a hot war.
So the stage was set. You had 4 huge conflicts all piling up. You had the fight over history, the fight over political direction, the security fight with NATO, and now open warfare in Donbas and Crimea.
All accumulating. And that brings us to February 2022. Russia launches a massive military operation across Ukraine, and the full-scale war that we see today begins.
And again, the narratives are critical to report impartially here. Russia's stated goals were things like demilitarization and denazification, claiming they were protecting people.
Well, Ukraine, and most of the world, saw it as a straightforward, full-scale invasion, a violation of sovereignty, an illegal land grab.
So let's step back. Let's try to synthesize all of this for the listener. If you're asking for the single cause of the 2022 invasion, the answer is there isn't one. It's a convergence.
It's a convergence of 5 interwoven factors.
Okay, let's unpack those 5 one by one. This is really the core of the deep dive.
The first one is simple: influence and control. Russia wants to keep Ukraine in its orbit. It sees Ukraine as essential to its own status as a great power. It's about prestige.
Okay. Number 2, and this might be the most immediate trigger, is NATO expansion. Russia sees Ukraine possibly joining that alliance as an absolutely intolerable security threat, which prompted a reaction.
Third is identity and culture. You have Russia pushing this narrative of historical unity, that Ukraine is intrinsically part of a Russian world. And at the same time, you have Ukraine asserting its absolute distinct independence and its right to choose its own future.
The fourth factor is just the sheer accumulation of tension. This wasn't a sudden event. It's the end result of 30 years of disagreements, failed talks, and hostile rhetoric that just eroded any chance of peace.
And the fifth and final factor really ties them all together. It's a convergence of all these structural conflicts. It's the perfect storm. You have geography, politics, security fears, and just raw power dynamics. Who gets to set the rules for the region all clashing at once?
That really highlights that this is, at its heart, a classic geopolitical struggle. It's about spheres of influence. It's about security, who you align with, and control how far your power stretches.
And if you can grasp those 5 structural reasons, you have the knowledge base you need. It moves the discussion beyond just emotion and into genuine strategic understanding.
So let's try to offer one final summary for you, the listener, to lock all this in. We can group the causes into 4 major themes, 4 pillars.
The first pillar, history and identity. That whole legacy of empire in the Soviet Union, leading to completely opposed views of whether Ukraine is its own nation or a part of something bigger.
Pillar 2, political direction. Ukraine's decisive turn toward Europe, which Moscow saw as a hostile move, a defection.
Pillar 3, the security dilemma. That unresolvable clash over NATO. Ukraine wants protection. Russia sees that protection as a provocation.
And Pillar 4, the flashpoints. The actual shooting wars that started in 2014 in Crimea and Donbas. That's what turned the disagreement hot.
And if you understand those 4 pillars, all underpinned by fear, power, and the desire for control, you have the essential framework for understanding this conflict.
We really hope this deep dive has given you that clear, contextualized picture. We've tried to break it all down into those structural reasons for clarity.
The complexity, though, it demands you keep thinking about it. We've just provided the framework.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought. We've successfully broken down the causes into these understandable components: history, politics, the future. But war itself is never simple in real life. Ponder the immense weight of these disagreements and the challenge countries face managing differences that span not just years but generations.
Keep learning, keep connecting the dots, and just recognize the depth of the challenge here.
Until next time.